Welcome to the Underwater Podcast, where we take a deep dive into the world of underwater portrait photography, cinematography, and everything in between. With me, your host, Brett Stanley. Welcome back to the Underwater Podcast, and this is our second season, which is pretty exciting. To kick us off, we have an interview I did at the end of 2020 with dive photographer Alex Dawson. Alex talks about his experience diving in his homeland of Sweden, learning to cave dive in old mines, and how he evolved his lighting style. We cover his approach to photographing wrecks and divers, and how his fear of water has made him a better diver. Alright, let's dive in. Alex, welcome to the Underwater Podcast.
Thank you very much.
You're based in Sweden, is that right?
That is very correct. I'm based in Stockholm, Sweden, born and raised here.
Oh, nice. Yeah. So you're kind of used to the cold water.
I'm very used to cold water. Since I'm a diver, I've been experiencing the cold water basically for almost 30 years now. So.
Right. Yeah. So how did you get into it? Like, was this something that you kind of did as a kid, or did you get into it later in life?
Diving I got into as a 19-year-old. Me and a friend went to Crete in Greece, an island, and went sunbathing and partying in our young years. And we happened to meet two other Swedish girls that were in the same location, and they were talking about scuba diving and snorkeling and things like that. And we got kind of interested. We didn't know anything about it.
Yeah.
So we got ourselves some gear and we went snorkeling with them, and we were like complaining about our heads were hurting when we were diving down and things like that. And they're like, you have to equalize because the pressure increases as you go underwater.
Yeah.
And so they taught us that, and they told us scary stories about how they have friends who dive in lakes in Sweden at night and they switch off the lights at the bottom of a lake. And I was like, my whole body was just panicking. You know, it's everything I hate, like sea bottom, darkness, the unknown, everything just said, don't do this. But yeah, after we came home, we signed up for scuba diving lessons pretty fast, I would say. And that was the start of it. I've been diving on an average about 100 dives a year for the past 27 years now. So
that's great. And it's so interesting that you say that you kind of, you had the fear and the panic.
And still do it to some point, I would say. I mean, I would basically say in some ways I would call it almost a water phobia. You know, I'm in a dry suit, so I feel okay when I'm in a dry suit. I don't touch the water. It's kind of silly, but yeah, I don't like the cold. I don't like the dark. And still I'm doing this. I don't know how it happened. I think I'm challenging myself, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, you're a cave diver, right?
Yeah. Full cave diver since October this year.
So how does that reconcile with these kind of fears that you have, you know, like being in a confined dark spot? What are you kind of doing mentally to kind of make that okay? I've gone through so much in my diving. I mean, I started diving in 1993 and I started diving a lot in Sweden. And already the first winter, we started with some very bad diving and bad judgment things that we did as 19-year-olds. We started diving in lakes that were frozen. Or actually in quarries that were frozen and that were connected with tunnels between the quarries. And we were diving under the ice without any safety lines, single tanks, just single torch. And we went through caves and stuff like that. We were young and we were very, thought that we could do anything. Invincible.
Yeah, exactly. And we were lucky. We made it through that. And then I trained 1996 as a military diver. So I got to experience very bad visibility and darkness and just sensing around underwater with just my senses and touching things. And that also helped a lot. And it's hard. It's very difficult to stress me underwater, but the thought of it scares me. But when I'm there, I'm totally fine. But the thought of it still scares me.
And do you think that fear of it and that kind of the stress of it kind of makes you a better diver because you are worried about things going wrong? So
I am cautious, and I am a very, I take high safety in my diving and what I say yes to in doing and things like that. But it's kind of important. I mean, it's no point making fun dives if you don't survive them. I mean, you have to kind of stay alive. So that drive is, of course, very strong for most divers, I would say, of course. But some people seem to not care about it.
Well, it's very interesting because we had Jill Heinerth on the show a few months ago, and she's cool. I feel like she's totally the opposite, where she feels the safest and the happiest when she's in a cave under the water.
I feel safe when I'm diving during the dives. Totally safe. But it's just the thought of it that can scare me, and also how I prepare myself. I might not have the best self-confidence always in diving, even though I have so much experience. So
do you think the experience is what's made you so confident?
It definitely is part of it. I mean, it took me 26 years to start proper cave diving training. It took me a good 15 years before I started technical diving. It took me 22 years before I started rebreather.
Oh, right.
So I would say I went fairly slow.
Yeah.
I did a few stupid dives back in the 90s because I was young and, male under 25. We do crazy things. But after that, I took it really easy. And and now I really enjoy training. Yeah.
Right, so you enjoy the process of the training of kind of getting certified.
And I like to slowly grow into these things, to the advanced diving, and I'm still not super comfortable with great depth. I mean, I think I've done maybe 5 dives so far, maybe below 70 meters in my 27 years. So that's very few for being also a technical diver for 12 years, rebreather diver for 5 years. So I don't do that much advanced.
So with those kind of, when you say you're not super comfortable with those sorts of things, is it the sort of thing where you're like, the increase of something going wrong, is not worth the risk, the joy of doing it?
It's always great risks. It depends on the team. There's so much uncertainty with visibility, currents. If you're diving a wreck in the middle of the sea, you don't know if the boat captain will hit the wreck with the mooring line or if he's going to miss it, and you have to do a search at 60 meters depth and maybe move the anchor or whatever they're dropping. So there's so many ifs, and if I don't have to be the first diver down, that's always a preference of mine. And I always carry so much gear. I was just thinking about it this weekend when we were cave diving in Sweden. I was thinking about, it's insane how much gear. I mean, I basically fill a van with gear every time I go diving, and that's just for me. It's crazy. It's 15 boxes.
Yeah, right. And is that stuff you would take on every dive?
Yeah,
or is it just stuff that's
it goes on every dive. Yeah.
Yeah. That's incredible. I mean, the cave diving, I'm not a cave diver. It freaks me out too much. But the redundancy that all the cave divers have, and I guess that's what the training is,
Absolutely. That's what the training is about. It's true of everything that you need. And if you don't need it, don't bring it. So, it's also about the team you're diving with and about the conditions in the particular cave or mine. And there's many things.
Yeah. So a lot of your photography is either cave diving or wreck diving. It's usually, or even under the ice, it's usually sort of either the outside of a confined space or the inside of a confined space. Yeah. Is there something that draws you to those spaces?
No, it's what we have. So it's basically, this is what I'm offered at home. I mean, you would think that I've traveled the whole world during my 27 years as a diver, and I haven't. I've never dived Southeast Asia, ever. I haven't been to Hawaii. I've only been to 2 of the islands in the Caribbean, and I've dived a lot in the Mediterranean Sea and around there and Scandinavia, but I'm not that experienced in many parts of the world that most photographers and underwater photographers have been to. I've only heard of the places, and because I do a lot of diving, I have family, so I have not been traveling so much for the past 10 years. I just started like 2 years ago again. Yeah. And so it's been a lot of diving in Sweden and Norway, and Sweden and Norway, I would say, is basically where I dive most.
Is there a lot of cave systems in that area?
We have no caves in Sweden to dive in, but we have mines. So old mines, silver mines, iron mines, and then we have great wrecks because the Baltic Sea is a brackish water lake sea, so it's very low saltity. So there's no shipworms there that eats the old wooden wrecks. So we can dive on 15th, 16th century wrecks.
Oh, so they're preserved.
Yeah, they're totally preserved. And the deeper you go, the more untouched they are. I haven't dived on this wreck, but there's one wreck at 115 meters, which is like 400 feet almost or something, which has like do you call it like a galleon in the front of the ship of a horse? And, really beautiful decorations on. So there's so
like
many
sculptures and stuff.
Exactly, like an old, I don't know, royal ship, basically.
Right.
So really cool stuff exists. Yeah, and everything is like totally intact.
That's
Cannons
incredible.
can be on board, and there's some pretty cool stuff in the Baltic Sea. Since the salt is so low, it's also the shipwrecks doesn't rust so fast. The steel ships, like if we talk the steamers from late 18th century, beginning of 19th century, which are fantastic wrecks, and there's so many that are sunk during First World War with all the mines that were floating around in the Baltic Sea and other stuff. So yeah, a lot of history.
Are they hard to get to, these sorts of wrecks? Are they far out?
The good ones are all far out, I would say, or the best ones are all far out that we know of. And I mean, there's so many people looking for wrecks in all the Baltic Sea countries, but they're mostly searching close to shore or like 10 nautical miles out from shore. So if you go further out, there's so much untouched territory where you can do pretty amazing discoveries if you put a lot of effort and time into it.
Yeah. So your approach to the wreck kind of photography, and I've had other people mention this to me as well, is that you do tend to shoot very wide and sort of not push in as much as other divers probably would. Is there a conscious thought behind that, or is it just an aesthetic that you liked?
It comes from my background as a nature photographer. I'm a landscape photographer. At the same time as I started shooting underwater, I started landscape photography, and I really love landscape photography. I'm a big fan of going to Iceland and shooting landscapes there, for example. It's so beautiful there. Topside, I'm talking. And I kind of like the idea of showing what you see. And that's why I never really capture close-ups. So I do, but I usually don't publish them because I don't like them. I like the wide shot where you can see the whole space. It kind of puts people, especially people that don't dive, it kind of puts them in the eyes of being a diver in a different way when they get the whole environment. Because if you just shoot like a door of a wreck with a diver coming out, doesn't say so much for a non-diver, I would say. And I'm always trying to create with my images, I want to be their feeling. And the landscape photographers that shoot, and that are very famous, like on Instagram and Facebook these days, they shoot something called hero shots, where they basically take a beautiful landscape scene and they put a person somewhere out of the picture. I mean, it's in the picture, but out of the frame towards the sides or somewhere in a nice composition, just to give a sense of size with a human. Because if you just see a landscape, you can never understand the size of anything. But if you put a small human somewhere, it can be hidden almost, or and those are called hero shots. So it's kind of, I took the hero shot idea underwater, I would say.
I mean, it's a great technique because it is, like you say, it's an, excuse the pun, but it's very immersive. You kind of get a very good idea of what's all around that wreck, and it doesn't look too distorted either. Like it's very naturalistic.
Yeah, I try to make it as natural as possible, and of course you have to enhance a lot in post-production, which you always do in Hollywood too. If you shoot a movie, you shoot in log or raw, and if you look at the log or raw material, it doesn't look anything like the final product. And this is exactly how my images are. If anybody would see my raw images, they would say, "Wow, that's nothing special." No, but you need to know how to shoot, how to I've learned how to use the raw material, how to shoot it so I can use it to my full advantage in post, and I always battle with the dark. So I always battle with shutter times. I need to go as low as I can without blurring the shot. And we're talking, it can be very fine. Some dives I get only blurry shots, and some dives I get 100% sharp, even though I'm at the same time. It depends on so many things. If there's a current, if my model divers are moving too fast, or if they're moving slow, like I asked them to, or and of course the light. So, and I'm always trying to, I really need a camera that can shoot at 50,000 ISO with 15 stops dynamic range and no noise, but those cameras doesn't exist. Not yet. They're not even close to that.
No, exactly. I mean, how do you battle that? I mean, you're in some questionable questionable lighting situations and questionable visibility.
Yeah. Always. I always battle the light. It's always, you always shoot in darkness, basically. So I have to bring all the light myself. And I don't like using ISOs. The sensitivity over the sensor over 3200 is really where I don't want to push it higher than that. And I shoot a Nikon D850, which is a fantastic landscape camera and fantastic dynamic range, and can pull so much detail out of that camera. But at 3200, it's really starting to crack for the work I do anyway.
Right.
Of course, you can shoot at 3200 if you shoot in daylight. It's no problem at all. But not in total darkness. I promise it doesn't work. I mean, it works, but it's really the border.
Absolutely, yeah. And so with this work that you're producing, where is it being used? Are these commercial shots? Are they being used for something, or is it just for your?
It varies. It can be commercial shots. It can be for brands that I collaborate with. It can be for editorials. It could be for friends, or a lot of the shooting I do, especially in Sweden, is purely training, because I mean, you need to dive, you need to shoot to get better at it. And so I would say 50% of all the diving I do is purely for training and getting better. And I've done so much cave training the past year, I would say. So it's a totally new environment. Like 1.5 years ago, I had basically not shot a single shot in mines or caves ever. Yeah. So I had to learn something new. So I did about 50 to 70 cave dives, mine dives this year to get better at that. And I would say not many of them have been work. It's mostly been for training, for getting better in that environment.
The mine diving that you're doing, and so like, as I said, I'm not, cave diving freaks me out, but it fascinates me as well. And a few years ago, I had the chance to do some cave diving in Hungary, in Budapest.
Oh, cool.
And the reason it was kind of attractive to me, and I thought I might try and, push past my fears, was because there is an old mine outside of Budapest that's filled up full of fresh water. And that to me is so interesting and so unique that I felt maybe I could push past my fear for this. It didn't happen, but no, for whatever reason, but that sort of environment just fascinates me. What's it like sort of going into these old mines that are now flooded?
It's, I have to try to think back to like my first, I can't really think back to the 90s because that's a different era. And so I don't even count that as it happened. So let's talk modern time, like last year when I started my first mine diving course. It was never scary. It's very fascinating. It's the mine that I've been training in is quite big. It's quite huge. So very often you can't even see the walls to the side or walls in the ceiling. So you just have this line like going in the center and you have the bottom below you. And you really don't know in which space you are. And you're so focused on the training, obviously, also. So there's a lot of task loading. So that takes away, of course, from all the thoughts you normally would get, I guess. No, it's
so that focuses you.
It's the focus, and during the course, I mean, you do 10 to 15 hours, I would say, on a course is what we did, and you have your primary light, and it's a beam, and you're so focused on what you point that beam at, and which is basically only on the line, because the line is your lifeline out again. If you lose that line and get lost, not in all caves and not in all mines, but in some, then you're gone. I mean, you got to keep track of that line. You got to keep track of your bodies. You got to keep track of your gas consumption because there's no surfacing straight up ever. So it's quite much discipline that's required for cave diving and mine diving, and so the focus is high. So it's you're focusing on the line and your team all the time, and I think when you get that many hours of it, I think after those 15 hours, you're so comfortable already in the environment when you're starting to actually dive around and look after your course when you're done. So you're actually quite comfortable. And most people probably start diving in the mine where you did your course, which that's what we did. And so we felt comfortable because we recognized ourselves and we're like, oh, here's this place. And oh, this is where you had to bail out blindfolded and had to share gas with your body through the restriction. And you remember all these things and you kind of laugh for yourself a little bit. And it's great.
Yeah, I guess once you've got that relationship with the mine and with the cave as well, you kind of feel a lot more comfortable because it's not as unknown.
Absolutely. And you have like small mini goals. You want to, when I get certified, I want to go and check that part and this part. You've kind of seen it during the course, but you knew you couldn't go there then. But then after you're like, I can go there. Or maybe you have to go to the full cave course where you can do jumps and more tees, or you can do decompression and things like that. Then you can go to other spots that you know of since your course, but you weren't allowed to go there. So you have like these small goals, and then you set new goals all the time, deeper and deeper and longer into the caves and mines.
Do you have a preference between mines or natural caves? Is there a difference?
Total difference. I've only done mines in Sweden, the one called Tuna Hästberg, Äventyrsgruvan, and I've done Långban and Sala Silvergruva. Those are it's a silver mine, the last one I mentioned. I've done those mines. They are all very different from each other, but they're all mines. And then I've dived caves in Mexico, and that's totally different because the caves in Mexico are, exactly. They are old dry caves that when the water level was much lower, so they were land caves at one point. So they're full of stalactites and stalagmites. Visibility is incredible there. And even there, the caves are so different depending on where you dive. And what's quite common in Mexico is that you have a halocline between 10 and 20 meters where fresh water mixes with salt water. So you get like this total crazy halocline dizziness when you go through it. If you swim behind the diver, when the waters are mixing, it gets all blurry in front of you. You can barely see like a meter. You can't see anything clear at all. So then you have to go deeper or to the side or up to get the clear vis again, because it's clear in the fresh water and it's clear in the salt, but when they mix it gets really messy.
And so with that halocline, is it kind of like mixing two syrups together? Like it's not like it's cloudy so much as just like two clear things that you can't, like blurry.
Yeah, it's two clear things that doesn't blend well together, so it turns into like the heat waves over a road in the summer, basically. Yeah. So
that's awesome.
And it gets really messy in your mind. So if I swim behind the diver, I always offset myself to the left or the right, so I'm not behind the diver, and then it's clear again. So it's really cool.
And I think I've had this before, like just even when the cold and the hot water kind of meet out in the ocean.
Yes. Yeah, that's called not halocline, thermocline.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, that happens too.
It's always interesting when you see that because you know it's about to get cold.
Yeah, but then it's nice when you get up also in the end of the dive and you go, now it's nice and fresh.
Yeah, that's right. Really, yeah, I mean you're in a dry suit, so you're probably not really feeling it that much, but
it gets cold.
You really enjoy it.
Yeah. No, you can definitely feel it in a dry suit too. Because usually when we have those thermoclines, it's usually 4 degrees in the cold water and then maybe like 10, 11 up in the warm. So it's always it's a huge difference. Because at 4 you get cold. You get very cold if you don't have like electric heating vests and like super thick undergarments. But you usually don't have too thick things, because if it's 11 on the surface, it's probably even warmer up in the boat. So you have to survive before you get in the water also.
Yeah, totally. I did my dry suit training here in LA, and it was like, it was boiling hot on the surface. But it was freezing cold down the bottom. So it was like you were either sweating or freezing. It wasn't there was no in between.
Yeah. It's tricky. Yeah, that's the tricky part with the dry suit in a medium temperated sea.
Yeah. So what's your approach to when you are in these caves and in these mines? I mean, your photos are just spectacular. But again, they are so wide. They give such a massive idea of the expanse of some of these mines. What's your approach to that in terms of being able to move away from your team and turn back and take those shots?
There is definitely team separation, but already as a rebreather diver, you're basically depends on you being self-sufficient,
right?
And technical diving too. It's your individual divers but diving together that can help each other, but everything is like, I have my rebreather. If the rebreather fails, I have exactly all the gas that I would need for decompression and deep bail and everything with me also. So I have redundant systems, and usually I have a lightning diver quite close to me anyway. I mean, not close, but like within 10 meters, and maybe the models are 20 meters away. And
right.
And I'm not. I used to, back 10 years ago, I used to swim around in the darkness, also in the Baltic Sea, and just shoot shots. And I would be like 10, 15 meters off the wreck, and the divers were on the wreck, and they had no idea where I was because I was out in the dark. But these days I have a small light that's always on my camera, but shines straight up or like backwards, just so they can see that, oh, he's over there. But the light doesn't interfere with the image.
With the shot. Yeah, and does that light kind of give them a way to know where you are in terms of getting the shots as well? So they can be in the right spots?
It's purely so they can see where I am in the darkness. Yeah.
When you're doing these kind of shots with models and with talent and the crew, do you kind of plan the shots before you go under, or is there communication down there where you're kind of like, you're after something specific?
Yeah, usually the good shots are always planned. They're not planned like as in weeks ahead, but they're planned on the dive briefing before we sit down for half an hour before the dive, talk about what we want to do, where we want to go, what we want to do, and then they ask if I have any particular lightning ideas or angles I want to shoot. And then we discuss that. And it doesn't always follow the plan because I might get a new idea during the dive, but we always have a general idea, and people always have a task before the dive. And usually they also do what they're being told. So it's, and then usually the outcome is really good. So,
yeah. I mean, it looks amazing. Yeah. And what sort of divers are you working with? Are you working with people that are doing rebreathers and who are used to this sort of stuff, or you kind of have to deal with other people depending on the project?
I deal with all kinds of people, but mostly I mean, the dive team that I've had for the past year is the people that has done the mine diving course with me, Sarah and Magnus, and they also did the full cave with me. So we have done almost 70, 80 dives, I think, the last year together. Right. So we have trained hard together. So we know each other underwater very well. And then we add other people into the team when we need more people, or if there's more people that want to join. Like this weekend, we were 5 people in the team, and we had a really good, almost 3-hour dive in one of the mines, which was fantastic. Really cool.
Yeah. And when you're doing these sorts of dives where you're going down and needing to get specific shots, do you have a diver that is just sort of helping you with lighting? How are you approaching the lighting situation?
Every diver usually gets a light. And if there's a new diver or so that doesn't feel so comfortable with lighting, I might not give them any light. But if they're experienced divers and well-trained and I know them a little bit, then I usually give them some kind of lighting job to do. And I brief them a little bit on what to do and what not to do before, and they get usually quite scared and they feel that it's complicated, but I feel it's quite simple instructions I give. But of course, it's new to them. It's difficult for me to understand how they feel, but I'm trying to do it as easy as possible for them, I would say.
Right.
And usually they do the job just perfect, I would say. So,
right. And is it all constant lighting, or are you using strobes under there?
I stopped using strobes 2008 when I discovered Continuous Lighting, a brand from Germany that had really good lights in 2008. And since then I stopped using strobes. I tried using strobes, I think, like a few years ago, and I was like, I still don't like it. So I sold them. So now I don't even own any pair of strobes. And a macro lens I haven't owned since I participated in the CMOS World Championship of Underwater Photography 2005. I didn't place well in any category there. It was on film, so it wasn't digital. And that's after that competition, I decided I'm not going to shoot macro anymore. I only own 5 different wide angles.
Right. Yeah.
That's what I
it's
like.
Definitely, yeah, it shows that that's what you like. You know, the images that I see. Yeah, I can't imagine you shooting macro stuff.
No.
The wide angle is so much nicer.
There's so many other photographers that are so good at that. And I really want to show the landscape of underwater. I really want to show the underwater world for people that are not diving. That's what I like. And absolutely. I get a lot of positive feedback from non-divers. So that's what I like, the landscape photography.
Yeah. I come from a landscape photography background as well. And being able to make people feel like they're there, that they're actually in that scene.
That's such a good feeling. Exactly. Yeah. You want to make people, I wish I was there. That's what I call it. Like, I wish I was there images.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. And I see other people taking those images on Instagram all the time. It's like, oh, wow, I really wish I could see this, or I want to go here. That's when I feel that's an image with the right impact that I want.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
So how do you deal being in like in a small confined space, like the inside of a wreck, but still trying to shoot wide? Are you dealing with the distortion in post, or are you techniques?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I deal with the distortion in post and sometimes cropping and things like that. But I always look for wide spaces. I look for wide spaces everywhere.
Right, that's what you're searching for.
It's in mines, in caves. Like when I went to Mexico, and I asked the dive center and the guy that I was using, like, where can I find the widest space in this particular cave? And he would say, like, you can go here, here, and here. These are the wide spaces. And we would go there, and that's where we shot, and that's where we got the great shots. So I need the bigger space I can get, the better. The better visibility and the bigger space I can get, the better the shot will be.
Right, yeah.
So large spaces is what I want.
Right, yeah. And are there certain places in the world that you prefer to go to to get those sorts of things?
I haven't been. I mean, Red Sea I've been to a lot. And I like shooting in the Red Sea, and I have a few ideas of that I would like to. I haven't dived the Red Sea in the really, really beautiful reefs like Elphinstone, Brothers, and things like that since I worked there, 1997. So I haven't been back ever with a good camera or with a professional camera or anything. I mean, I've been to the northern Red Sea where there are fairly nice coral places. Like Ras Mohammed is very nice, the nature reserve. That's beautiful. But so I would like to try my techniques on coral reefs also, like maybe in Russia or somewhere in Solomon Islands or Fiji, maybe this. Yeah, there's so many places that I think I could shoot my style, but with no wrecks and no caves, but just corals and stuff. I think that would be pretty cool. But I haven't done it yet. But I've been wanting to do it for the past 10 years. So it's after Corona, I think.
Yeah. Once the vaccine sort of kicks in. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. We need that vaccine now.
And so talking about the natural side of stuff, is there any interest in shooting with wildlife as well?
I do love diving with sharks. Sharks is fantastic. It's such a fascinating animal, and I love being around sharks. I went to French Polynesia last summer and dived the Fakarava Pass and did night diving there with there's a documentary called 700 Sharks in the Dark, which is a fantastic documentary that I would recommend people see.
Oh, right.
And it's night diving in the eastern strait of Fakarava Atoll in French Polynesia, and you can have like the title says, up to like 700 sharks circling around you, and they are pretty wild at night, I have to say. They're very different from daytime.
Yeah, because they're mostly hunting at night, right?
They are only hunting, and wherever you shine your torch, and if you accidentally shine your torch on a fish, that fish becomes a target, and then there's 50 sharks after that fish, and it goes into the corals, and then the sharks, they break so much corals. I thought divers were the ones destroying the coral reefs, but my God, I've seen sharks destroying coral reefs.
Just because they're trying to get in there and squeeze in to get the...
Oh, yes. Yeah. The white-tip reef sharks, they are very long and slim. They dig themselves in and try to hunt the fish out, and they get the fish out, and then the gray reef sharks come after, and they bounce into the corals.
Wow.
The corals are flying left and right, I can tell you.
That's crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, it was pretty fascinating to see.
And I have heard I have heard that story of, like where you shine your light, you're basically signing the death warrant of whatever's in your beam.
Yeah, basically. But also, I mean, they find the fish in the dark also. But if you put the light on it, it helps.
Yeah.
And I think it's because the fish moves when you put the light on it. So it's because sharks have very bad eyesight, from what I understand. I'm not 100% sure of that, but that's what I've heard. So I think, but then the fish does a twitch when you shine the light on, and that's when the shark senses the movement in the water and they go.
Right. Yeah. That's amazing. Yeah. So a lot of your shots are in places where there's sunken tanks. There's looks like a jetliner. Are they? Yeah. I'm assuming a lot of those are artificial reefs, like they've been sunk for dive.
All of these,
spots.
all of those that you mentioned are artificial, and the Lonely Tank was sank in 1999 by King Abdullah of Jordan in the Middle East, and he's a diver himself, the king there. And so he sank it as an artificial reef and as for a study and stuff like that. And it turned into corals, started growing on the tank and everything. It was totally amazing when I was there the first time, 2002. But then it got so popular because, I mean, images started spreading of this tank underwater all over the world. So people would come basically just to Jordan just to dive this tank because it was unheard of. Basically, unless you would go to like Truck Lagoon or other places in Pacific from the Second and First World War. So after that, they started doing more artificial reefs. So like 3-4 years ago, they sank a Hercules at 17 meters depth. And then after
that the helicopter?
No, a Hercules military airplane.
Right.
And then a couple of years or 1 or 2 years later, they sank the whole military museum, which is basically a convoy on the underwater, which is 2 Cobra helicopters, 2 Haubitz cannons, and a couple of tanks and anti-aircraft tanks and jeeps and rocket launchers. It's everything. It's it's a really cool dive. And
because you've got some shots of that, and
I was invited by the Jordanian tourist board to promote that for dive magazines and social media and stuff like that. So I've been to Jordan quite a lot actually.
When you were there, was it quite soon after they'd sunk everything?
I was there fairly soon after I think less than 1 month or something like that after they sunk it. Yeah, I think it was last summer in August I was there.
Because I think the shot that I love is the shot of the Cobra helicopter sitting on the bottom. There's 2 divers next to it, and what I love about that is that it doesn't seem like it's been there very long. Like it's not covered in coral or anything. It looks so surreal.
That shot is taken in December last year, about a year ago on the day, basically. And it had been sitting there less than 6 months.
Right.
Yeah. And I dived it again in March this year, and it had changed a lot. Right. It was already, all the color was gone and coral starting to grow on it. And big change just in 3 months.
Wow, yeah.
And now with COVID, I think the coral growth, because it has been less diving tourism, obviously. So I think the corals have probably grown quite a lot on the whole military museum now during lockdowns.
Yeah. How do you feel about that? Do you prefer these sort of places when they are new and pristine and surreal, or do you like them later on when they're sort of starting to become more, basically go back to nature?
I like both, I would say. I mean, I would say the easiest thing is probably to say, I mean, I love architecture and I love, modern homes and design and stuff like that. But I also love like abandoned places when, there's moss on the walls and beautiful old windows and round staircases with a lot of detail and stuff. I mean, so it doesn't really matter anything beautiful. I mean, and I've dived. You mentioned also the airplane. I think another airplane, which is the passenger plane, the TriStar Lockheed, which is also sunk in Jordan. That one I was there for the scuttling. So I was there while they were scuttling the plane last year in August, and we dove it 2 days later. And of course, it was still perfectly white and everything, and that was pretty cool, I have to say, to dive on a freshly sunk airplane. Very, very cool with all the colors and everything were like as it should be, and the seats, everything was fresh. It was nice. And then I've dived it 9 months later. I mean, in March this year, and it's basically sediment over everything. So it's like brown over everything because it's located a little bit closer to the harbor, and so there's a lot of particles in the water and stuff like that. So it's all covered in like a thin layer of sediment, I would say, and so it doesn't look as appealing. I think it's still a great dive, but it's just different. I liked it when it was fresh.
There's a shot you have on your Instagram, and I think I saw this, out, not in the context of your Instagram. I think it showed up in my feed one day, and it's basically following someone through the fuselage, through the passenger cabin. And I'm not sure if the plane's upside down or if the pitch is upside down, but all the seats bottoms are now either, they're kind of floating to the surface of the plane because they're all. It looks like it's a crashed plane that you're going through. It's so real and so raw. And those shots were taken just after the scuttling. They were taken, very shortly. I'm trying to remember when that scuttling was. I'm mixing everything together, I think, but anyway, I think the image that you posted was on September the 3rd, 2019.
Okay, September. So it was probably scuttled in August last year then.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it must be so surreal to swim through something like that, where you're seeing everyday items.
Yeah. And I mean, I fly a lot, so it's a bit crazy feeling. I mean, but the image is not shot. The diver is actually diving upside down, so the plane is not upside down. The plane is sitting correct. Yeah. I thought I would make something fun out of it because he was such a good side mount diver and he could dive upside down. So I was like, why not flip the image? I like to screw people's minds up. I mean, if I can confuse people, I will do it.
You did it
because it brings attention, and I like that. I like to mess up people's minds when they look at something and they don't really understand what they see. I mean, that's kind of fun. I think it challenges the mind. And I think it's fun to do that. And it's fun for me also.
It's an amazing thing to do in the Instagram age as well, since when people are just scrolling. And they'll look at an image for 2 seconds and think they know what it is. But with something like that, we go, hang on, what was that again? And they go back to it.
And you go scroll back. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I like to create things. I'm not so much for copying. I prefer to, I like to invent things. Like I like to do shots that haven't been done, or that at least that I haven't seen.
Exactly.
I like to create ideas from scratch and not necessarily copy other people. Sometimes I copy other people and try to enhance an idea, but I prefer if I have a brand new idea that just comes randomly. Like this top lighting that I'm using, which I call selfie lights on many of my images, that was born during a Christmas concert in Stockholm 3 years ago. We were sitting at a Christmas concert and I was like, wow, that's really cool lighting on stage right now. I'm going to use that underwater. And so I started using that underwater and it was actually a huge success. So
what does that look like? What's the effect?
It's like a stage light from top lightning, just to give this hard shadows straight down instead. So if you have a diver swimming like half a meter over the bottom, you get the perfect shadow of a diver on the bottom, and it just brings so much interest to the image, I think, and it makes it very atmospheric, and it looks good on stage, and it looks good underwater too. So
it's interesting. It's interesting you say that, because I spend, I'm a big fan of lighting, and lighting kind of drives a lot of my photography. And so I do spend a lot of my time at concerts, when we could go to concerts, looking at the lighting going, oh, that's cool. How can I take that underwater? So it's interesting that you've had the same experience.
Yeah. And that's what I'm gonna sound a little bit critical now towards macro photographers or many underwater photographers, but it's quite common that divers that shoot subjects closer, they just lit a subject. They don't set a lightning. They just illuminate the surface. But illuminating the surface is not setting a lightning. I have 15 years from the commercial industry and fashion in studio work. I was shooting for many big brands, and that I just stopped with 2 years ago. And so I'm used to setting lightning with strobes and reflectors and shading off light from that direction, and using
constructing a lighting.
You're creating a feeling with the light, and that's what I took underwater also, because I got tired of this illumination photography. I wanted dynamic, because photography to me is about light. I mean, how you use light. That's why a sunset looks better in a daytime shot. It's because the light is nice. With a low angle, hard shadow, long shadows, and soft shadows, because of the sky is reflecting a lot, and instead of the hard midday light. So this is what I wanted to bring underwater.
Well, a lot of what I love about your work is that it is cinematic. Like, some of these shots look like they're almost a behind the scenes shot of a movie set. The way that's lit is very, very well thought out.
I try to work that way. And what's funny about it is I haven't basically watched any TV series ever on Netflix, and I don't watch any movies at all. So you would think that I am a big fan of movies and stuff, but not really. I think I just created my own way, but it's very similar to what they use in the film industry, because I see still images. I watch a lot of still images instead. And so I see movie scenes, but as still images. And I guess maybe that's how I get the ideas also. So I would say definitely it comes from Hollywood.
And a lot of it, I think, with your work is you're telling a story, which is similar to, to movies, but you're telling a story in that single shot with that lighting. It's not like, oh, here's a ship and someone in it. There's more to it than that.
Yeah, that's. I'm happy to hear that you feel that way, because that's. I'm happy if that's how you look at it, or other people look at it, because it's what I would like it to be.
Yeah, I was definitely coming across that way. Yeah.
Cool.
So in terms of, the whole world now is, it's very Instagram based. The whole photography industry is, Instagram is now our business cards, basically. Are you following other people on Instagram that you're finding their work is quite innovative, or people that are getting you excited about other work?
Yeah, I mean, I would say probably 50% of what I follow is basically friends in some way. But then I have a few accounts which are really good inspiration. Usually not underwater. No, not much underwater. I follow underwater photographers, but they're friends. But my inspiration usually comes from nature photographers, I would say.
Right.
Especially like people from Iceland, and who else am I thinking of? Yeah, and a lot of free diving shots also that inspire me a lot, and some people that shoot a lot of whales and stuff like that can inspire me. It's and follow a few filmmakers also, because I like that. I'm trying to get into shooting more and more video. I got myself a camera this year, beginning of this year, that shoots raw video. So I've been shooting a little bit of video, and the few tries I had. I've been fairly lucky. I mean, the first movie I released, or my first reel that I released, I think it had over 2 million views between my and another account where it was shared. So it's a good reach for me anyway.
Yeah. And with the video stuff, with the motion, are you looking to sort of basically take the style that you've got now and just put into motion?
Absolutely. I'm gonna basically do what I do now, but I'm gonna, instead of having static images, I'm gonna have the subject move. So it's gonna be still images, but with moving content. So
that's beautiful.
I'll still do exactly the same thing that I do, but it's gonna demand extremely much more from my team mates and lightning guys and everything like that. So it's a good challenge. It's way more complicated, way more. Still images is so easy compared to shooting video. I mean, it would, in my mind, I'm thinking, to be realistic, every dive you can maybe accomplish 3 to 10 seconds finished cutted video.
Right, yeah.
And we're talking like a 2-hour dive and you get 10 seconds of content.
Yeah.
So if you want to do something that's like a half an hour long, then my God, we have to do some diving.
I'm sure you'd hate that. Yeah. That's great. Alex, thank you so much. This has been absolutely amazing.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having this chat with me, and I really enjoyed it. It's good to talk to people with similar interest and knowledge.
Absolutely.
Really nice. Yeah.
Well, thanks so much, and hopefully people can check out your Instagram and get lost in your work.
Yeah. Thank you. I hope they enjoy it.
Thanks for listening, everyone. And as always, if you like the podcast, please subscribe, review, and share. If you'd like to support the production of these episodes, you can purchase our very cool merchandise at theunderwaterpodcast.com. We've got branded coffee mugs, stickers, beer cozies, and posters featuring our amazing illustration and logo by Joe Hodino. If you'd like to connect with us or learn more about our guests, you can reach us at theunderwaterpodcast.com or on Instagram. We also have a Facebook group where you can discuss the episodes and even get your questions answered by the guests. There's a link to it in the show notes. You can learn more about my underwater photography workshops and mentoring at brettstanley.com or Brett S Photo on Instagram. The Underwater Podcast is presented and produced by me, Brett Stanley, and our music is Neo by Oh Boy. Keep creating, everyone. I'll see you in the water.